particular utility boat or with one of our many sisters throughout the nation. This has been the workhorse of the Coast Guard for decades, involved in practically every mission that we have. Since its first year in service in 1973, the 41-foot UTB has conducted over 350,000 sorties, saved over $400 million in property, and saved 41,800 lives. Those are some pretty impressive numbers, and at a cost of $235,000 for each boat, I'd say that the taxpayers got their money's worth. The Coast Guard built 207 UTBs, all at the Coast Guard Yard in Curtis Bay, Maryland from 1973 to 1978. And they quickly became known for their rugged and seaworthy design and ability to execute the multi-mission nature of our work. They were the workhorse for over 40 years. The 41-footer has been replaced by the exceptionally capable 45-foot response boat medium. But we will never forget what these boats meant to the crew that operated and maintained them. Hull 41410 spent nearly all of its career in Lake Michigan, with the exception of one tour of duty at Station St. Clair Shores. Many of you here have already heard the story of how I grew up sailing with my family on Green Bay and visiting Door County every summer, and was inspired to join the Coast Guard after visiting the crew at Station Plum Island in 1987. Perhaps seeing this 41-footer displayed in Sturgeon Bay, a Coast Guard city, and the first city that welcomes you to Door County will inspire another young person to consider joining the Coast Guard. I have come full circle. Thank you for this very special visual representation of your support to the men and women of the United States Coast Guard. It is our honor to serve you. Thank you to Senior Chief Sen and his crew for making this the best looking 41-footer I have ever seen. And I knew when I got here, when I took command last summer, when they said that they were looking for something for the museum, that we could make this happen. And the Coast Guard cutter Mobile Bay brought it over from Milwaukee for them, and it is on permanent loan to thank you very much. But now, I'd like to introduce an officer who has dedicated himself to service in the Coast Guard for over 33 years and spent many of those years here in Sturgeon Bay and our Great Lakes. After I took command last summer and paid a visit to Sturgeon Bay, I can't tell you how many people asked me if I knew John Little, aka the Coast Guard rock star from Sturgeon Bay. Now, Captain Little assumed the duties of Chief of Staff, 9th Coast Guard District, Cleveland, Ohio in 2014. After serving as both the deputy and commander of Coast Guard Sector Hampton Roads in Portsmouth, Virginia. He has over 33 years of active duty service with 12 years afloat, serving in 5 Coast Guard cutters, and had the honor of commanding 3, including the Coast Guard cutter Katmai Bay and Mobile Bay, as well as the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac, which he commissioned in 2006. He is a true D9 sailor and my boss. It is my privilege to introduce Captain John Little.
Okay, so those were kind words. You're right, I am your boss, but you didn't have to, but I appreciate you saying that. And folks, I tell you, it's an honor to be here. I am John Little, the 9th District Chief of Staff, and I've been in the job a year, and I'm here representing Admiral June Ryan, the 9th District Commander. She took over in June, and she'd love to be here, but she couldn't, and I'm thrilled that she didn't, because that gave me a chance to come back to Sturgeon Bay, to a place that I love, and in a place that was home for me and my family. I'm here representing over 6,000 men and women of the Coast Guard. That's active duty, reserve, civilian, and Coast Guard auxiliary that all represent the Great Lakes, the blue suiters here in the Great Lakes. You know, the almost 33 years I've been in the Coast Guard, and my wife and I have been married 30. We've been all over the United States and even over in Hawaii. And I tell you, this was by far our most favorite assignment. And it was our most favorite because of the people here, the people that treated us so well, the people that treated our families so kind. And it is now an official Coast Guard city. And we were thrilled about that. And in fact, so thrilled that we came back last year when they were named that. I'm honored today to be joined on the podium, obviously by some distinguished guests and visitors, and truly they do know people. Mayor Birmingham, it's great to see you again. It's nice to see you again, Captain Cocanour. You know, it's really good to have Chief Warrant Officer Clark here. and the representation from the Door County Maritime Museum. It's great to see all of you. To the commands here, Commander Tasikas, who brought in Big Red, it's great to see Mackinac. Commander Godwin, CO of Mobile Bay, it's great to see your crew. Thank you for being here at Mobile Bay. Senior Chief Sin, it's nice to see you, and thanks for what you did to get this small boat looking so good. She looks great, I got to tell you. And Coast Guard's City Sturgeon Bay's favorite son, Captain Tim Wynn. It's good to see you here, Tim, and it means a lot to me that you're here. And I know you call Coast Guard City Sturgeon Bay home. So does your wife, and they love you here. And I'm just sorry I didn't get to see your dad. You know, folks, it's a privilege to be here to honor this 41-foot utility boat. One of the most successful boats built in Coast Guard history. Again, you've heard over 40 years of service. This UTB has saved thousands of lives, millions of dollars of property, and has been always ready for the call. Based on test results in Curtis Bay, Maryland, this prototype was taken in 1971 and put into production for nearly 170 boats constructed between 73 and 1978. With a beam of 13.5 feet and a draft of 4 feet, she's powered by 2 Cummins diesel engines and can make a maximum speed of 26 knots. Actual service demonstrated by the UTB showed that they were more seaworthy than that. They could actually survive more extreme conditions. But Coast Guard policy limited its use to 30 knots of maximum sustained wind and 8-foot seas. This policy, like so many in the Coast Guard, was established due to a tragic event that occurred on 15 November 1977. This 2 years, almost to the day after Edmund Fitzgerald went down. Of Coast Guard 41332, who capsized with a loss of life due to a stern sea that came over her low stern. Much like her predecessor, the 40-foot UTB, that showed a vulnerability. Over years, time, wear and tear, and technology began to overtake the 41-foot UTB. Once a suitable replacement was developed, the Coast Guard started the retirement process over 40 years later with the 45-foot response boat medium, the RBM. Truly a remarkable platform and incredibly seaworthy. 41410 was the last in the Coast Guard's inventory, retired in Grand Haven last year. She went into service, as you heard before, in 1977 and spent several tours here on the Door Peninsula in 2002 and 03 and again in 07. In fact, I'm very proud to say that when I commanded several ships here, this boat, I had the honor of working alongside of it when it was at Station Sturgeon Bay. They did many, many missions for me and were great, were an unbelievable asset. They served with distinction not only in the Coast Guard but along the Wisconsin Door. And why wouldn't they? With a wide range of recreational opportunities and so many people here that call Wisconsin home in the summer particularly, when they fish and camp and explore the beautiful Door Peninsula and the waters of the Great Lakes. But these waters, I kid you not, can be hazardous. And there's no coincidence that the stations in Plum Island, Bailey's Harbor, and here at the Canal Station were strategically positioned for a reason. Indeed, these beautiful Great Lakes can turn on a dime. The weather is unbelievable, can be so dynamic, and thunderous sea conditions can be almost escapable. Time and again, to this very day, people underestimate the power of the sea. I say this all the time. It's especially here on the Great Lakes, when so many above our cutters who came aboard our cutters as guests or even new crew members who couldn't believe the first time we got into the rough sea conditions in Lake Michigan and said, oh my goodness, I always thought this was just a lake. Nothing could be further from the truth, right, Tim? That search and rescue mission that's so prevalent and the backbone of our service served our brave crews very strongly with this 41-foot utility boat. The Plum Island Life Saving Station served proudly for many years. Began operations in 1896 at Port de Morts, commonly known as Death's Door, where the fate of many ships still reside. In 1990, the Coast Guard was moved to Washington Island, and Plum Island Station was eventually closed and is the last of 15 Duluth-based type stations. Both the station and the boathouse were placed in the National Register of Historic Places in 2010. I've sailed by that station many a times, and it's still beautiful. Right here in Sturgeon Bay, our Coast Guard history began with the completion of the privately owned Sturgeon Bay and Lake Michigan Ship Canal in 1880, which was transferred to the U.S. government in 1884. And bids let for $4,560 to build a canal station and a life-saving station soon thereafter. One of the most notable rescues of this station occurred in October of 1895 when the two-masted schooner Otter went aground in Whitefish Bay. At 9:10 that morning, a message was received at the station that the schooner Otter was laying a quarter-mile offshore, flying a signal of distress. From Sturgeon Bay, the lifesavers equipped and transported by horse and wagon 12 miles north, arriving several hours later. Surfmen promptly set up their beach apparatus and landed a successful shot of the Lyle gun. Using a breeches buoy, saved the 6 imperiled on board. And shortly thereafter, the schooner broke into pieces. In more recent years, Sturgeon Bay has gone on to rescue thousands and save millions of dollars in property. Little did these crews know, or those whose lives were saved know, that these beautiful Great Lakes, these pristine waters, would become the economic engine that they have today, generating nearly $5 trillion annually in economic output. On a global scale, that would rank the 4th largest country in the world if it were its own, accounting for over 25% of the combined Canadian and U.S. economic activity and supplying 46 million jobs in these two countries. That economic engine is why people live, work, and recreate here in the Great Lakes. And that's why the Coast Guard's here. It's also part of an amazing relationship that exists between Door County and the Coast Guard that dates back many years. The crews from the station, the Cutter Mobile Bay, the Marine Safety Detachment, and the Electronic Support Detachment have all become part of the fabric that is the Wisconsin Door Peninsula and Sturgeon Bay. And they're all very proud to call this community home. Therefore, I couldn't think of a more fitting place for 41410 to lay to rest, to be proudly displayed here at this beautiful Maritime Museum, at the foot of this historic Michigan Street Bridge, near the original location of Dunlap Reef Light, all that mark the gateway to the beautiful Door Peninsula. You know, 225 years ago, George Washington instructed the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, to create a system of cutters to collect revenues in the new republic that would become later the Coast Guard. In 1791, Secretary Hamilton wrote a letter of instruction to the first COs of these cutters that outlined their leadership principles that we use today. Effective presence, on-scene initiative, unity of effort, restraint, and flexibility while managing risk. These are the marching orders that are still with us today, followed by our cutters, our small boat stations, our shore units, and our aircraft. We're always here, and we're always ready. In closing, let's be mindful of the fact that many service members are deployed around the world at this time. These women of the armed forces are like no others. They volunteer to serve. They understand and accept that service comes with inevitable sacrifice. To protect us and defend our nation, they repeatedly tread in harm's way for the greater service of humanity. Our world is a far better place because they chose to serve. Congratulations, Mayor Birmingham, John Asher, who worked so hard to make this an official Coast Guard city. Your team here in Sturgeon Bay, congratulations on behalf of the 9th Coast Guard District and Admiral Ryan. And happy birthday, 225th birthday to the United States Coast Guard. It's an honor to be here.